Hello, Iron Sharpens Iron family and friends. This is Trey. Today we're going to talk about what a ticket holder is. So I came across this quite some time ago and it threw me off. I'm like, what does this mean? What is this? It took me quite some time to figure out what they were talking about here. I was really just lost. I kept searching and searching, but now I have a little bit more information on it. I'm going to share it with you so that you can learn about it and maybe even do some more digging than me and find out what exactly this is all about. I don't know. Ticket holder. Typically, a ticket holder means someone who is holding a ticket for a special event. If you recall the last video I did, what is a specified event? Well, when a change in a child's life occurs, it is considered to be an event, and it is recorded at the Vital Statistics Department. So any events that create a significant upheaval, change, or whatever in a child's life is a recorded event of vital statistics, and a ticket holder holds the ticket for a specified event. Found that really interesting. In the case of our above heterosexual couple, they could decide that they each want to be a primary ticket holder for the child. The donor or biological father would have the assurance of a relationship with the child, but the mother's primary ticket holder would have the ultimate authority to decide the form that relationships would take. By initially giving the primary ticket holder the right to distribute tickets, but later asking the state to protect those relationships once the child and the ticket holder have formed a relationship, the likelihood that the children would be caught in a tug-of-war between people they care about will be lessened. If a primary ticket holder later decides to revoke a ticket on behalf of the child, the former ticket holder can seek visitation from the court. At a certain age, somewhere between 10 and 12, a child should be allowed to have veto power over the exchange of tickets suggested by the primary ticket holder. When children reach 18, they start over with a clean slate. What does this mean? It was all I could find, just this little excerpt, but I saved it to see if I could dig into it a little bit more, figure things out. And so I found a little bit more on it, and I'm going to share that with you because I'm sure that you guys probably find it as interesting as I do, or I hope you do, because it's not something I had heard before this moment in time. Let's go over here. So here's what I've discovered as far as ticket holders of children are concerned. Children's rights. This has a lot to do with the UN's Human Rights Commission that is developing opinions about what rights do children have, if any, and so forth and so on. And I'm going to go ahead and impose my thought on this because I feel so strongly about it. I want to share it. I don't care what anyone else thinks. In my opinion, children do have rights. So the idea behind this theory is that children's rights are beholden of the parent. So they only have the rights that the parents provide. Well, I think that we can all agree that's not 100% true. So what we have here is a human being before he's a parent's child, right? This human being, I believe, automatically comes with, or I think that most people would agree at least, that their rights as far as, you know, having their little bodies protected should be at about 100%. This is not really what human rights is about. It's not what the UN thinks, and it's not what the United States thinks about children. So, you know, you got to wrap your head around that. But when we talk about human rights, I had read a case, and I'm just going to quickly go through it with you to help you understand. I read a case about women being brutalized in some of the third world countries. And they had a debate in the Human Rights Council through the UN about whether or not it is the duty of government to protect the women from being raped. Well, they determined that it is not the government's responsibility to protect a woman from being raped. That boggled my mind. Like, what's human rights for then? That just makes, to me, should make common sense, but we're not talking about people who have common minds, right? These are experts, people who believe themselves to have a higher level of knowledge and understanding of the world and life as we know it. So in accordance with them being so brilliant as they are, they've determined that government is not instituted to protect anyone's body, basically the physical. That government duty is only to protect the rights of the individual. Now, seemingly to me, it would just make common sense that it kind of goes hand in hand, but that's not really the way they perceive it. I believe most of us probably perceive it that way, except for the experts who are smarter than us, I guess, and possibly with less empathy, sympathy, or compassion, maybe, I don't know. So this particular case, like I said, they came to the conclusion that it's not their responsibility to protect a woman from rape. However, it is their responsibility to protect a woman's right to excel. So basically, in a nutshell, she wouldn't be raped if she was independent. I'll have to read the case to you someday. I was totally floored by that, but you know, it is what it is. Children's rights. Children are young human beings. Some children are very young human beings. As human beings, children eventually have a certain moral status. There are things that should not be done to them for the simple reason that they are human. At the same time, children are different from adult human beings, and it seems reasonable to think that there are things children may not do that adults are permitted to do. In the majority of jurisdictions, for instance, children are not allowed to vote, to marry, to buy alcohol, to have sex, or to engage in paid employment. Equally, there are things that arguably should not be done to children because they are children, such as conscription into military service. What makes children a special case for philosophical consideration is the combination of their humanity and their youth, or more exactly, what is thought to be associated with their youth. One very obvious way in which the question of what children are entitled to do or to be or to have is raised by asking, do children have rights? If so, do they have all the rights that adults have? And do they have rights that adults do not have? If they do not have rights, how do we ensure that they are treated in the morally right way? Most jurisdictions, according to children's legal rights, most countries, though not the United States of America, have ratified the United Nations Convention on Rights of the Child, which was first adopted in 1989. So everybody else except the United States of America ratified a United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. Interesting. The convention accords to children a wide range of rights, including most centrally the right to have their best interest be a primary consideration in all actions concerning them, the inherent right to life, and the right of a child who is capable of forming his or her own views to express these views freely in all matters affecting the child. So, United States does not agree that a child has the inherent right to life, and they do not agree that they are capable of forming their own views. That's why they didn't ratify this particular rights of the child. I don't think I share in the same idea as the people of the United States on that. I might be socially defective. I'm okay with that. So, however, it is normal to distinguish between positive rights, those that are recognized in law. Positive rights, positive law. Those are that recognized in law. And then there's moral rights, those that are recognized by some moral theory, such as non-positive law in the United States, and a social compact where we all agree that we will have the same morals, share in the same moral ideals, principles, and behaviors. Social Security. That the children have positive rights does not then settle the question of whether they do or should have moral rights. However, there are at least good political reasons why one might think that the UNCRC provides an exemplary statement in the language of positive rights of how children should be treated and regarded. Nevertheless, the idea of children as rights holders has been subject to different kinds of philosophical criticism. At the same time, there has been philosophical consideration of what kinds of rights children have, if they do have any rights at all. The various debates shed light on both the nature and value of rights and on the moral status of children. So here's what we're saying. The government should not protect your body. However, the government should determine what your morals are. I don't know. What do you think? Now, this specific government, I got to put my 2 cents in on that, determining the moral status of children and people. Have you ever seen who sits on this panel? If you haven't, I highly recommend you go look. Go and look who are the ambassadors sitting in this United Nations forum determining what moral statuses look like. It's going to blow your hair back to find that some of these people have committed genocide on their entire populations. Some of these people who are developing these moral guidelines have promoted brutality, rape, mutilation. Some of them have different religious perspectives on things, so their moral standards would be quite different from, the majority of us here in the United States. But they're the ones who determine ultimately around the world what morals we should be applying to our lives when they seemingly don't have morals themselves. I find that riveting, absolutely riveting. These matters to be considered below need also to be seen as closely tied to at least 2 other philosophical questions. What is childhood? And how do the putative rights of children stand in relation to the rights of those adults who arguably have rights over children? The first question is considered in length in part 1 of Archer 2015. The second question broaches the issue of parental rights and responsibilities. So these geniuses are trying to figure out what childhood is. They're a developing mind, just like we're a developing country with people who are developing their intellectual growth in order to, in order to make sure that we intellectually increase our ability to create peace in the future. So Article 1 of the United Nations Convention defines a child as any human being below the age of 18 years unless it adds under the law applicable to the child majority is attained earlier. And what follows this definition will be assumed. Some think it's obvious that children do have rights and believe that the only interesting question is whether children possess all and only those rights which adults possess. Others are skeptical, believing that given the nature both of rights and of children, it is wrong to think of children as right holders. So who holds the right of a child, or what is a ticket holder? So in the States, for the most part, mom would be the ticket holder or the one holding the child's rights. And the only way she can be removed of that position is through court order. The only way a child is able to exercise those rights is if mom, who's holding the tickets, gives one of those tickets to a child's eventful life to another person, such as dad. And that's nature, I suppose, because it's a United Nations human rights issue, which means we're following natural law to believe somewhere along the line that moms automatically are the holder of the child's rights, which I can't, a lot of guys are going to hate me for this. I can't completely disagree with, because when a child is an infant, if they're breastfeeding, this is a difficult one. I don't see any really good reason to take a child away from breastfeeding. I think that breastfeeding is the most wonderful thing for a child. And that's not to say you have to do it. If you're bottle feeding, then it's a little bit easier to switch, the child out. But to me, if all parties agreed that their children were going to be breastfed, then I hope that we would stick to that, just because it's really good for the baby. One background worry against which such skepticism may be set is an oft-expressed concern at the proliferation of rights by either extending the list of right holders or expressing more demands as rights claims. The concern is that the prodigality of rights attributions devalues them rights. A favored metaphor in this context is monetary. The inflation of rights talk devalues the currency of rights. Did you hear what I said, friends? A favored metaphor in this context is monetary. The inflation of rights talk devalues the currency of rights. Are rights currency? We have dollar bills that are mediums of exchange, but are our rights the actual true currency that funds government function? Something to think about. This thought must trouble the defenders of children's rights, since, after all, talk of children having rights has postdated the introduction and general acceptance of rights talk as such. There are, however, more particular reasons for being suspicious of the idea that children have rights. That throws me off, sorry. I'm not suspicious of the idea that children have rights. Like I said, when they're with their parents, obviously they're not with a full set of rights, but the very basics, as in let's not assault or batter them, let's not rape them, I would say that's pretty common sense, and I hope to goodness gracious common belief. And let's stop minimizing it. How about that? Why is it when a child has experienced some sort of battering as such, we call it abuse or molestation? How about we call it what it's worth? This is something that I feel this is a part of the reason why the United States didn't sign up to the whole rights of the child thing, because it would eliminate some of the minimization of terminology. We wouldn't be able to say abuse and molestation anymore. Now we would call it assault, battery, and rape. To appreciate these is necessary to be clear about the language of rights. With respect to rights in general, we can inquire as to what it is for someone to have a right, or put another way, we can ask what being a right holder consists in. There are here two competing accounts, one of which is seen as fatal to the idea of children as rights holders. We can ask a different question, namely, what must be true for there to be rights? That is, we can try to specify what have been called the existence conditions for rights. We can also construct a taxonomy of the different kinds of rights. Finally, we can ask what the moral significance of having a right is, or what weight rights have. With regards to any acknowledged right, we can identify it by means of its content. What is it a right to? And its scope. Who has it and against whom do they have it? As well as its weight relative to other rights and to other moral considerations. Not all of these questions are relevant when we want to focus on a particular issue of whether or not children have rights, and if so, which ones. However, the first question raised above is especially salient. What is it for someone to have a right? Here, there are two competing theories whose respective virtues and vices have been extensively debated. In one camp is the will or choice theory. In the opposing camp is the welfare or interest theory. The first theory sees a right as the protected exercise of choice. In particular, to have a right is to have the power to enforce or waive the duty of which the right is correlative. The second theory sees a right as the protection of an interest of sufficient importance to impose on others certain duties whose discharge allows the right holder to enjoy the interest in question. And this, my friends, is more in tune with the way that United States rolls on what a right is. So that second theory, for being a protection of an interest of sufficient importance to impose on others certain duties whose discharge allows the right holder to enjoy the interest in question. Okay, so this is what we have when we think of like the Constitution protecting our rights, our children being our liberty interest, our homes being our property interest that we have the capability of enjoying because we're interested in those rights, right? So this is more along the lines of our country. I don't know how each of the other countries weigh in on that, but just to kind of break that down. It is natural to think that each theory is more appropriate for certain kinds of rights. The will theory fits rights actively to do things, to speak, to associate with others, whereas the interest theory fits right passively to enjoy or not to suffer things, to receive health care, not to be tortured. However, the distinction between the theories of what it is to have a right is not the distinction between different kinds of rights, even if there are important relations between the two distinctions. In this present context, one alleged defect of the will theory is its exclusion of some humans from the category of right holders. This is because whilst all humans and perhaps many classes of non-humans, such as animals, have interests that ought to be protected, not all humans have capacity to exercise choice. Children, along with the severely mentally disabled and the comatose, cannot thus, on the will theory, be holders of rights. Severely mentally disabled cannot thus, on the will theory, be holders of rights. If you're severely disabled, it means that you don't really have any sense of independence. It means you rely upon someone else to take care of your needs. It means you receive services. Children, along with the severely mentally disabled, basically severely mentally disabled are children in that perspective. For at least one prominent defender of the interest theory, the fact that children evidently do have rights is sufficient to display the falsity of the will theory, thus making children a test case for the latter. Children are a test case to see if they actually have rights or not. Human subject research, anyone? Of course, someone who is convinced of the correctness of the will theory might readily concede that the theory entails the denial of rights to children, but see no reason to abandon a theory. For her, the entailment is not children have rights, therefore the will theory is false. It is the will theory is true, therefore children cannot have rights. The claims in question can be set out as follows. These are not premises in a single argument. Rather, they are claims made and conclusions drawn by the different theories of rights. In particular, claims 1 through 4 are made by the will theory and 5 through 7 by the interest theory. So rights are protected choices. Only those capable of exercising choices can be rights holders. Children are incapable of exercising choice. Children are not right holders. 5 through 7 for the interest theory. Adults have duties to protect the important interest of children. Rights and duties are correlative, and children are rights holders. That is your United States model, my friends, for the most part. However, the reason the United States is not party to the convention is because they don't know, which is why it's non-positive law. They have not concluded yet which theory is best for our particular culture. And so they will continue to conduct studies to determine which category, or perhaps even, both categories, how they can apply it. This is non-conclusionary for us, therefore it remains a non-positive law. Because of that reason, it is presumptive in nature. We don't know the answer, therefore we will presume that by cultural beliefs, as far as we've learned thus far, that the adults have the duty to protect interest of children. So this is what I've been going over with you, so that you can understand how natural law is applied and why everything is researched, studied, and experimental. So this non-positive law is really just us participating in the research being conducted to determine what the law is. And that's what the Social Security Administration is all about, and those titles. We are participants, willing, voluntary participants in these experiments. To explain, an important claim held by many is that for each and every right, there is a correlative duty. To say that I have a right to something is to say that someone else has a duty to me in respect of that thing. This, of course, does not mean that there may not be some kinds of duties which do not correlate with any rights. Indeed, some critics of children's rights will concede that adults have duties to protect important interests of the children, but deny that the interests correlate with rights held by children. So I'm not going to go all the way through this. This is a lot. I just wanted to give you a general idea of how they are debating on what it means to have rights. The experts, the geniuses, decades and decades upon research. Actually, the people that like to do this type of research have been doing it for ages. So I don't know why they're playing stupid, but this is not new. This is not new science. It is not new to America. It was even prior to Europe using it. So I don't know why they play like they don't know some things that they do, but it is what it is. That's why we have to learn government. And then we have free will and choice to determine if we feel that we know what's best, or if we would like to submit our power to others to tell us what's best. And that's what's important. That is, to me, what's the most relevant and most important, which is why I reach out to all of you to help you all learn this, because we have some decisions to make, kids, that we haven't tended to. We've neglected our duties. So let me just pull up one more thing here, and then we will wrap it up.